When is self-defense justified? That's the subject of today's Need to Know. Need to know what? Need to know the law. Dave McDermott here, McDermott Law Group, McDermott Mafia, McDermott Militia, all one and the same. Guys, this is part 2 of our self-defense series, Need to Knows, okay? So let's get right into it. Let's answer that question. It really depends on the circumstances, okay? What am I talking about? Well, are we talking about lethal force, or using lethal force to defend yourself, or non-lethal force? Let's talk first about the latter, non-lethal force. Somebody comes up, they punch you, you turn around, you punch them back. Very often that's going to be considered self-defense because somebody hits you, you went ahead and defended yourself and you hit them right back. Now, if you continue to go ahead and hit them and beat on them to the point where they're unconscious, that's not going to be considered self-defense. There's the issue of proportionality, okay? And there's also an issue of who the aggressor is. Let's talk about who the aggressor is. The aggressor is usually the person that's starting the fight. Now, it doesn't mean, hey, if you said something to basically get under this person's nerves, and you call them a name or something, that's not being an aggressor, okay? It might be being obnoxious, but it's not being an aggressor. So the person hitting you, that is being an aggressor. That's an aggressive behavior, and now you're having to go ahead and defend yourself against that aggressive behavior. So be sure that you don't become the aggressor, which means that if this person hits you and then you start just beating away at this person, you're now the aggressor. You stop being the victim, you became the aggressor. It's not going to be justified. Let's talk about lethal force. Lethal force, deadly force. When are you able to use lethal or deadly force? And again, we're talking about Illinois for the purposes of these need to knows right now. Laws change from state to state. Many of these principles are very similar or the same in multiple states, okay? Lethal force, the use of lethal force in a self-defense situation basically means where you put in would a reasonable person in your circumstances believe that he or she was about to receive serious bodily injury or death, okay? So that means, ultimately that means the judge, the jury, listening to the facts, understanding it. Would a reasonable person believe, would they believe that they were in a position where they would have to use deadly force to go ahead and defend themselves? That's the question, basically. So if in fact deadly force is something that needed to be used, if in fact a reasonable person would believe that he or she was in reasonable apprehension, reasonable fear of receiving serious bodily injury or death, that's usually going to be justified. Again, it comes down to how it's being argued, but as far as the law goes, it'll be justified. As far as the judge or the jury goes, it's can be based on how well you argue that. Anyway, that's it for today's Need to Know. We got part 3 coming up of this series. Hope you're enjoying this. Hope you're learning something. And in the meantime, obviously, as I told you before, if you have any questions about anything we're talking about, please write them in. We're going to go ahead and cover them. I've got questions. I haven't gotten to them yet because of where we're at in the self-defense series, but I will get to them eventually. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.